There's a strange kind of pride in being exhausted. You know it well. That quiet smirk after pushing through a sleepless night. The nod of approval when someone says, "You're always working," as if self-neglect were a virtue. You've learned to wear your burnout like armor, to numb your hunger for rest with caffeine, and keep sprinting through life even when every part of you is begging to stop.
But here's the paradox. The more you ignore yourself, the more invisible you become. Not to others. No, they still see the performer, the achiever, the giver. But to you, you stop recognizing your own voice, your own needs, your own face in the mirror. And yet, in all the chaos, a quiet question lingers beneath the noise. What would happen if you turned all that care you give to the world back toward yourself? You've been told that pampering is indulgence, that comfort is weakness, that stillness is laziness. So you move faster, work harder, give more, until even joy feels like another task to complete. You say, "I'll rest when I deserve it." But who decides when that is? Here's the truth no one tells you. You don't become more human by doing more. You become more human by remembering you're not a machine. But you've forgotten how. We all have. Because somewhere along the way, someone rewrote the script, convinced us that self-worth must be earned, that pleasure must be justified, that to slow down is to fall behind. So now, you live on autopilot, mistaking motion for meaning. You sacrifice your softness to survive the grind. But at what cost? What if the world doesn't need another hyper-functioning version of you? What if the world and your own soul is starving for the version of you that knows how to feel again? No, this isn't about scented candles or luxury escapes. It's about reclaiming something much deeper, something stolen from you long ago. But who took it? And why did you let it go so easily? To find the answer, we have to peel back the layers, not just of your habits, but of your history, of your conditioning, of your unconscious beliefs. And that journey begins in the shadows. Let's go there.
It didn't start with you. Long before you learned to silence your needs, long before you felt guilty for resting, a deeper current was already shaping your sense of worth. Not through words, but through culture, through expectation, through unspoken rules that praised sacrifice and punished softness. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And perhaps that's why you've been trained to do the opposite, to manage yourself like an asset, to optimize every moment, to ignore the whisper that says you're allowed to feel whole now. But why? Because the modern self was never built for wholeness. It was built for utility. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the slave morality, a moral system born from suppression, where suffering becomes a virtue and power is mistaken for sin. This is the system you were born into, where discipline is divine and joy must be postponed until it's earned. You were handed a script: work now, live later, serve others, and maybe you'll be seen. Deny yourself, and one day you'll be enough. And so, without ever realizing it, you internalized a false equation. Value equals productivity. This lie has deep roots. Arthur Schopenhauer spoke of life as a pendulum, swinging between pain and boredom, where moments of peace are fleeting, almost suspicious. The moment you stop, you feel the pull of guilt. The pause becomes punishment. Rest feels like a crime with no clear victim, yet you carry the weight of it anyway. But what if the crime is against you? The self-neglect isn't accidental, it's systemic. When people are disconnected from their inner world, they're easier to control, easier to sell to, easier to push beyond their limits. A person who doesn't believe they're worthy of gentleness becomes addicted to proving themselves through suffering. You've been conditioned to see pampering as a privilege, but perhaps it's a birthright, the quiet rebellion of choosing yourself in a world that profits from your self-abandonment. And yet this hidden machine doesn't just live in ideas, it lives in your body, in your habits, in your nervous system's quiet panic when you dare to slow down. But if you never stop, never soften, what begins to break? That fracture is already spreading. You just haven't seen the full cost yet.
You think you're holding it together. You go to work. You smile. You say, "I'm fine," when people ask how you're doing. But underneath it all, there's a constant hum, a low-frequency tension that never quite leaves. You brush it off as stress, as adulthood, as life. But what if it's something deeper, something quietly unraveling, strand by strand, behind the facade of functionality? Here's the thing about self-neglect. It doesn't explode. It erodes. Slowly, subtly, your sense of aliveness begins to dim. Joy becomes mechanical. Relationships feel like obligations. You catch yourself scrolling endlessly, not for pleasure, but for escape, from the silence that reminds you of how disconnected you've become. Your nervous system, designed to oscillate between action and rest, gets stuck in survival mode. Cortisol spikes. Sleep becomes fragmented. Your brain rewires around urgency. You forget how to how to sit with yourself without needing to achieve or fix or earn something. Neurologically, this constant denial of self-care shrinks your window of tolerance. Minor irritations now feel overwhelming. You snap. You withdraw. You numb. The body, deprived of softness, begins to protest. Headaches, fatigue, digestive issues, skin conditions. It screams in the only language it knows. Pay attention to me. But you've been trained not to listen. Cognitive dissonance kicks in. The part of you that craves stillness is at war with the part that equates rest with laziness. You binge to cope. You overwork to atone. You oscillate between guilt and exhaustion, and the cycle continues. Meanwhile, society rewards your dysfunction. You're called resilient, ambitious, a hustler. You wear those words like medals. But deep down, you suspect they're just euphemisms for self-neglect that hasn't collapsed yet. The cost? Intimacy becomes difficult because you're barely present. Creativity dries up because your soul is malnourished. You stop asking what you want and only focus on what you must do. And here's the cruel irony. The more you abandon yourself, the harder it becomes to recognize the person you're abandoning. This is not just a personal crisis, it's a cultural epidemic. But here's the good news. Epidemics end, and healing begins the moment you choose to see the invisible prison you're in. So now, the question becomes, how do you rebel? How do you unlearn the war you've been waging on your own softness?
What if everything you believed about strength was a lie? What if real strength isn't about how long you can endure, but how deeply you can feel? What if resilience doesn't mean pushing through pain, but refusing to abandon yourself in it? This is the rebellion, a quiet, deliberate refusal to participate in your own erasure. It begins not with a loud declaration, but with a whisper, I matter, even when I'm not performing. That single truth dismantles centuries of conditioning. Aldous Huxley once said, "The real, hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear to be most normal." You know these people. You may be one of them. Perfectly polished, eternally composed, dying inside. And yet, the world claps. But rebels don't seek applause. They seek truth. And the truth is this: pampering yourself, emotionally, mentally, physically, is not indulgent. It's revolutionary. Start small, not with luxury, but with presence. Run your fingers through your hair, not because it's tangled, but because it's yours. Sit in the sun, not for vitamin D, but because warmth is your right. Say no without explanation. Cry without rushing to fix it. Choose slowness even when the world demands speed. You're not broken for needing rest. You're human. Viktor Frankl, survivor of unimaginable suffering, spoke of meaning as the core of life. But meaning doesn't bloom in the noise. It grows in stillness, in softness, in space. You cannot find meaning while chronically abandoning yourself. And if you still feel guilty for choosing yourself, remember this: every system that ever sought to exploit people began by convincing them they didn't deserve rest. Choosing to pamper yourself is choosing to remember you are more than your utility, more than your output, more than what others need from you. It is a declaration: I am not a machine, I am not a martyr, I am mine. This rebellion will not be televised. It won't go viral. It will be quiet, daily, often unnoticed by others, but you will feel it. The fog will begin to lift. The voice inside you, the one that's been whispering all along, will grow louder. And then something extraordinary happens. You begin to return. But return to what exactly?
Here it is. The truth you've been circling. The one hiding beneath every to-do list, every restless night, every desperate attempt to finally feel enough. You're not tired because you've done too much. You're tired because you've done too little of what's real. Somewhere along the way, you were convinced that your worth had to be proven, that softness was weakness, that love, especially self-love, was something to be earned like a paycheck, not received like breath. So you became a master of pretending, of functioning, of keeping it together while quietly falling apart. But here's the twist. What if you were never broken? What if the exhaustion isn't a sign that you're failing, but that you're faking? Faking that it's okay to ignore yourself. Faking that you don't need affection, or rest, or gentleness. Faking that you can keep going like this. You don't need more discipline. You don't need more hustle. You need to come home to yourself, to feel your body again, not as a vehicle for output, but as a sanctuary, to take your pain seriously, not as something to be solved, but something to be seen, to treat your needs not as distractions, but as directions. You've spent your life tending to expectations. But who tends to you? No one is coming to give you permission. No one is coming to rescue you from the storm you've normalized. The rescue is you. This is the moment where everything can change, not with a dramatic gesture, but with a single decision: to stop betraying yourself. That's what pampering really is. It's not luxury. It's not vanity. It's remembering you have a body, a mind, a soul, and they are not here to be sacrificed for someone else's definition of success. It's not about bubble baths. It's about boundaries. It's not about treats. It's about truth. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, I'm still here. I still matter, even now. And when you finally believe that, when you stop waiting for some future version of yourself to be worthy of love, something ancient unlocks. You stop surviving. You start living